Yay, here we go. Hi, Rio.
Here we go.
Well, for those who don't know me, my name is Jason King. I'm a Tantra teacher working with gay, bi, queer men based in Amsterdam and Berlin. And Rio, you popped up in my YouTube, Instagram, one of these algorithms a number of months ago. And the message that you are bringing forth for us spiritual homos, gay men, queer men, really spoke to me on a really deep level. And so I was really looking forward to getting to talk with you more and share, the perspective that I'm coming from on my spiritual path and also my journey around a lot of sexual healing, but also to learn more about your perspective.
My dog
Oh,
wants to make an
hello.
appearance.
And yeah, I just think it's such a beautiful opportunity, as gay, bi, queer men, homos, to get to talk about things that are, really meaningful for us.
Yeah.
And we already discussed we will not agree on everything, and I think that's beautiful to be able to just bring different perspectives into this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you because of your background and because, in my own life, sexuality, my personal relationship with sex has been, I think, the catalyst for me to go into a deeper understanding of who I am and to explore my spirituality because it was a wound that kept coming around and I was like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this until I had to. And then it kind of propelled me into the work that I do today. So I think we're going to
Mm.
have a lot to chew on here.
Yeah, maybe we can try to share in a nutshell, a bit of the journeys that we've been on. And you already mentioned this kind of wounding around your sexuality and that opened you onto your spiritual journey. Could you share the essence of that?
Yeah. I mean, the first wound being a little gay boy growing up in rural Oregon in the Mormon religion. So there's all that's wrapped up in that. And yeah, I felt conflicted in my relationship with sex for a lot of my I was going to say adult life, but my entire life. And and yeah, I just didn't feel like there was an on-ramp for me to become a sexual being. It was just like all of the sudden, here I am. Um, I moved out of my parents' house at 18 and moved to a neighborhood and became best friends with a drag queen who was older than me. And it was like, all right, I'm in the scene. And I I really wished looking back that there was some like mentor that could have helped me understand. And all of a sudden I was having gay sex and I didn't know, what I was doing. I didn't know how to trust my own body, how to listen. Um, and yeah, and so that there was a felt like a lot of pressure to be a particular type of sexual being. And so I pressured myself to do things that yeah, that just had impact later. And so in that exploration, um, yeah, I just discovered a lot of pain that I had carried
Mm.
that I wasn't aware that I carried. And that led me deeper into my relationship with myself, which led me deeper into my spirituality. Um, so that's the shortest way to say it.
Amazing.
How
Yeah,
about
thank
you?
you. Yeah, I grew up in St. Louis, very Catholic. And Catholic by choice, not just, my parents, but I was really, really into my faith as a teenager, had a really strong relationship with God, and then just completely shoved my sexuality, swept it under the rug.
Mm.
Was like, don't want to deal with this. This feels really messy. And finally, when I went to university, I came out. Um, Quite soon fell in love. I was very fortunate to fall into a really beautiful, loving, supportive relationship. Who was the first person I had sex with? And I still had this tension between my faith and my sexuality. But after this experience of loving sex, I was like, there's no possible way this could be wrong. Like,
Mm,
I was a better version of myself. It was so loving. And so I left the Catholic Church at that point. Didn't really think too much about it. Was just kind of like, bye. and and really threw a lot of the spiritual baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Um, I then moved to San Francisco, also moved into the gayborhood, kind of became the big city gay, was sexually exploring a lot. Had some amazing experiences, had some really shitty experiences, really had no idea about boundaries, what that was, how it really felt in my body. I was really just like, I want to try everything, but pretty reckless at the
mhm,
same time. And then I came to a festival in Berlin where there were all of these conscious sexuality workshops with other gay men. And we were doing erotic massage with each other, but in these groups, and people were sharing their sexual energies so generously. And for me, it felt so healing because so much of my insecurities would come out in gay spaces where I'm around other gay guys and I feel I'm not hot enough, I'm not masculine enough, I'm not ripped enough, whatever it is, in order for my sexuality to be validated, desired, seen as beautiful. And so to be in this space with all of these very, very different men, very different types of bodies, sharing sexual energy in this generous, loving way felt so connective and really breaking down a lot of this hierarchy that I had experienced. And that just kind of, I felt like there's something here for me. And it launched me all the way into my career, feeling like this is a medicine that gay men really need,
mhm,
that actually our sexuality is not just a form of currency
mhm,
for us to spend, but can also be this portal to really deep healing and belonging and community and feeling connected as men. And for me, there's something very special in being a gay man that we actually can share our sexual energy in these open ways. And when that's done with love and intentionality, it has the potential to really, really build us up rather
mhm,
than kind of reinforce a sense of not being good enough.
mhm. Beautiful. I love knowing that. I feel like there's hearing hearing individual stories, there's so many pathways to wholeness. There's so many pathways to remembering our divinity. And yeah, just hearing yours, it's it's beautiful.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, I know you were curious about kind of the connection between being spiritual men and being sexual men.
Hmm.
I'm curious how that feels for you, this connection.
Mm. It's been personally, for me, it's been a process of deconditioning myself from religious beliefs about that God is here with an opinion about your body and about your desires, and that if you desire something that differs from what you perceive God wants you to desire. So it's so deep that I've found many different threads where I go, oh, that's been a hidden limitation and a hidden um, belief that God can't be here with this desire. So my practice for years has been finding all of those hidden places where religiosity still had its threads, its cords, and reclaiming my desire as sacred and that there isn't anything. God isn't a being that has an opinion about my life or my dick or my ass, to say, okay, all of it's welcomed, all like God can be here in whatever the raunchiest experience is. Um, and, this has been the balance that I'm always kind of dancing is that I also feel that sexual energy is something that is sacred, not necessarily in the religious way of, you can only have sex with someone that you're in love with, but sacred in the sense that there's a deep energetic exchange on a soul level that happens when sexual union happens. And so it's been a balance for me to honor my sexual energy, to honor my sexuality while not demonizing those desires. Um, so it continues to be a line that I walk and will tip a little to one side or the other to find my own balance. Um, so WIP, work in progress there.
I'd love to learn more about this because I definitely agree sex can be this extremely intimate, energetic exchange. Certainly when I talk to some female friends of mine, if they talk about having sex with a man who comes inside and it's like they can feel his presence in their body for days, which I
hmm
think is pretty incredible. And so I'm definitely on board that we can be really affected energetically by the people that we have sex with. And I also hear in what you're describing, it sounds like a desire for discernment. Um, Maybe even asking, does my partner honor the sensitivity of the thing that we're doing?
Right.
Um, and that could be, I imagine, quite tricky to navigate.
Yeah, and I think, as you're talking about sensitivity, I think there's degrees, right? That there are people who maybe aren't as uh emotionally or energetically sensitive just by design, just by who they are, and it's not right or not better or worse, but that there are people who are just, you know, that's not a part of their gifts or their design. And then there are people who are designed, and I think a lot of us homos are designed in this way to be energetically sensitive. And so that sensitivity, if not held in the right way, both as the individual, like me, holding my own sensitivity and being discerning, as well as creating the context for what we're doing together. I think that that's a big part of it is like, okay, if I'm going to have sex with someone once and I'm not interested in developing a relationship with them, the context of what we're doing together, for me to explicitly express like what I'm interested in, that I want and need a sense of connection with that person, is my job, and then to discern whether they have the sensitivity to meet me in the place that I want to be met. To me, that's how it can become sacred
Mm.
versus, I guess the difference to me is conscious versus unconscious. But that to me, the consciousness in the context that I approach it as makes it sacred. And that anything can be made sacred. It's not the act, it's the intentionality behind it. But for me, the intentionality has to be everyone involved has some similar intention.
Mm.
That's where I got tripped up in the past, which was just like, okay, I'm sexually free, and so to express my sexual freedom, that means I can just fuck whoever I want, whenever I want, and there's not any repercussions. But I was finding many repercussions for myself as a sensitive being, and also as a, in those eras, it was a time when I was also in deep healing. And the healing around sexual wounds from childhood, I wasn't honoring those things. And yeah, so multi-layered, I guess, is where I'll
Mm.
pause this here.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm definitely hearing the sensitivity. And I think this is something that's so individual of, what do I need to feel safe enough to go into any erotic encounter with somebody? And so maybe for one person, it's like, hey, this has a lot of spiritual meaning for me. And I want to feel that that's honored, that that's welcomed here, that uh, I can also bring my feelings into this experience and
Yeah,
not have to kind of perform
yeah.
something where I detach from the fact that this is actually really, really meaningful for me. I think I don't personally experience sex with that level of sensitivity around like the energetic exchange. And for me, a glory hole could be sacred, not even knowing who's on the other side, um, because I'm approaching it with this conscious awareness. I think that takes, let's say, some advanced skills.
Hmm.
um, to be able to be really clear in yourself, about your intention. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Um, and yeah, that's just what jumps out to me when I hear you talk is there's a sense of like, what do I need for this to feel good?
Hmm.
And we'll meet that experience on many different levels. So you might be meeting it on this very energetic level that has a lot of meaning. Other people might be meeting it on a more emotional level. What do I need to feel emotionally safe and secure to open up to you? Other people might be meeting it purely on a physical level. What do I need physically to feel like this is sexually safe?
Yeah. As we're,
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and it sounds like you might also want to be kind of discerning of, hey, this is the level I want to meet this experience at. Is this other person available to meet me there?
Yeah. And as you're talking about this and, different people meeting in different places, it also reminded me that my approach to everything in my life is through a spiritual lens. Truly, like, do I want to go sit in this restaurant with these people in this environment? Does the energy here feel like it will serve me or detract from my experience? But also, I know that I'm here to play a very specific role in the world, and my role in the world requires, and I say this, because I'm choosing it, but requires me to be as clear of a channel and as a vessel as I can. And that it's something that's really important to me so that the work that I'm doing with others, um, can be as clear as possible. And I do notice, there've been many times where right now I live up on a mountaintop. I'm rarely around people. But when I go down into a city and I walk around, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of energy here. And I'm be aware of my sensitivities to not take on the energy of others in these spaces. So yeah, in a lot of ways, I feel I'm unique in that, but I also believe that there are plenty of people who have that same level of sensitivity that aren't aware and could feel tossed and turned by lots of different day-to-day experiences, but especially by sexual experiences if they're not aware and approaching from a conscious place.
You're definitely not the only one. And it might be helpful to even name there's kind of conscious sexuality, which is approaching sex with consciousness. Why am I doing this? Going slowly, really feeling the whole experience from start to finish. Then there's sacred sexuality. And I would say there's like a whole scene, there's a whole subculture of sacred
Hmm.
sexuality where often layering in this energetic layer and then realizing that sex can be this portal to God, this
Hmm.
portal to the divine, whether that's solo or with partner, and working with our chakras, having energetic orgasms, building our life force energy.
Hmm.
And a lot of what you're describing to me sits pretty squarely under sacred sexuality. So you're definitely not alone. It's a pretty hetero, scene, but for sure they're out there. Tantra is using a lot of these same technologies, but putting it in service of awakening to your true nature.
Hmm.
And this is where, in some ways, Tantra becomes much more confrontational because a lot of it is about challenging preference. And what you hear a lot in the sacred sexuality scene and really in a lot of spiritual paths. So this is a very valid view, but a lot of spiritual paths focus on like purity of alignment. As you said, I only want to do things that feel in alignment with my highest self. I only want to be in spaces or around people that support me being in alignment with my highest self because that's where my vibration is the highest. That's where I feel most open and clear and connected to the divine. In Tantra, a lot of these preferences can actually be seen as getting in the way of deeper levels of awakening because we can become overly attached to belief systems or identities. And so this is where I often kind of hold a delicate grasp on things, um, which is sometimes when we have strong preferences to like I need life to be this way because this is what feels right for me, there can be a bit of a trap. And so what you might hear a tantra teacher, my teacher used to advise, for example, is you really want to support your awakening process, go to a bathhouse and have sex with all of the men who repulse you the most, because what we're trying to do is actually deeply challenge the conditioning that tells you these men are more attractive than these are better aligned for me, their energy is better. No, 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 I can't be around these humans. That feels really messy. That's going to bring my vibe down. But actually, there's this shared humanity. And when we really awaken to the truth of who we are, all of these preferences start falling away because we don't need to kind of place this hierarchy around things. Um, so again, different paths, both of them absolutely have their virtues. I'm kind of more in this like really let's challenge that, and this is where a lot of guys feel challenged in tantra workshops because because it's gonna bring you up against a lot of your preferences that might feel like this is right for me, but there may even be underlying layers of attachment to like, preference, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to clarify for me, it's not about high vibe versus low vibe. And I I don't approach life from that lens because I don't believe that that's healthy. And so what I hear you saying is like being in the world. And I think that's highly important. And also, there are there are energetic exchanges happening all of the time, and there are environments that serve us and don't serve us from my perspective. Um, and I think I spent a lot of time putting myself in environments where I could have challenged preferences for a long time. And and I came through that going, okay, and there's a life that suits me, and that suits what I feel I'm here to do. And for me, is purpose is everything. And not that doesn't mean my job or anyone else's job, but the role that we're here to serve. And every path, right? Every path leads to God. Every path leads home. Every path, like none of us can ever get it wrong. I don't believe that there's a wrong way to do life and or a right way to do life. Um, but just for me, I've discovered through a lot of trial and error what works for me and what doesn't.
Beautiful. Yeah. Tantra is really not about being right. It's about what's actually true. And
Hmm.
so if you've gone into that, introspective process and you're like, yeah, this feels deeply true. And I'm also, aware of like psychological patterning that might be present in this case. That's the most interesting thing. Stay aligned to what is actually true for you and that is unique,
And
and
it
and what's
changes.
true for you might be different for someone else.
And it changes, right? What's true for me, what's right for me now versus what maybe will be right for me in a year or 10 years is different. And I'm completely open to changing my mind. I do it all the time. And I think it's important to be self-reflective. Something I was saying to a guy that I work with the other day was like, he was in this like deep self-reflective place and like asking all of these like important questions about his life and his purpose and um and I said like I hear your self-reflectivity right now, and that's good and it's important, but you also want to consider like what self is being reflective, because I do believe that there's like the true self and there's the conditioned self. If it's the conditioned self or the false self that's being reflective, it's only going to be reflective on, patterns of like, you need to fix yourself. There's something wrong with you. You're not going to get it right. You better do it right, or else there's some standard that we're trying to live up to. So if that's the self that's reflective, then you're never really going to thrive because you're staying in this limited identity that's not actually true. So I question myself all of the time. I think I probably questioned myself far too much, and and finding my way to where I am today feels like a good balance of, okay, babe, you can trust what you're doing, what feels right is for you. And yeah, just let yourself follow that.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's never ending.
Yeah,
It's just
that's
never a never ending process of self-inquiry.
hmm.
Um, and yet, I think as you get further on the path, you're much more aware of your own patterns and your own things, which can distort your view. And I find it's still really important for me to have other people in my life who are like checking me,
Hmm.
um, giving me direct feedback. Are you sure? What about this? Because they know my patterns,
Hmm.
and I'm not awakened yet, and so I still fall into them. I'm really curious because this is what kind of first caught my attention when you popped into my feed. You talk a lot about homo spirituality, and I'm curious if you could lay out what that means to you.
It's something that continues to tell me what it is. It was something that like just came out of my mouth when I recorded a video a year and a half ago or something. It was just like a moment of frustration of um, feeling like there were so many of us gay men who were stunted and kind of like stopped our personal evolution at coming out, and that was like, okay, this is our point. I'm liberated now, but not going much deeper into who we are as spiritual beings or walking an awakening path or living consciously, however we want to approach it. And I was feeling this frustration of like, I know that there's a an inclination, at least for a lot of us, towards the divine, towards the spiritual, towards um, the mystical that is inherent within us. And because religion cut us off from that, used the name of God or used religion and spirituality to essentially shame us and cut us off from our own spirituality, devalue us, that there's a need to reclaim that. And yeah, it just came out of my mouth. There's like, we need homo spirituality. We need to remember our version of spirituality that includes our homoness, that isn't only about, because like the play on words, homosexuality, that sexuality is the core piece there of the thing that differentiates us from others. And I don't believe that that's true. I think it's included in this bigger picture of how we differentiate from, let's say, like straight counterparts. Um, so that sexuality is included, but it's not the main differentiator. And I think that, that to me was like where the point of liberation comes for many of us is like, okay, I'm free to be my sexual self. But what about these other parts of myself that are influenced by my gayness that to me point towards what I call a soul calling or a contract that we have, that my belief is we come in, our essence comes into this body, this family, knowing that we'll have specific sets of circumstances that will activate our our purpose through wounds, through challenges, through gifts, through things that we're interested in or inspired by, and that because we're gay, we're coming, especially gay men specifically is who I'm talking to. Gay men who come into this world at this time in the world. If we were gay men that came into this world thousands of years ago in a tribe, how we would perceive ourselves, we wouldn't even call ourselves gay, right? There's no label or name for it, but that there's a reverence for that difference. And so for us to come in now, having forgotten that reverence or that value, part of homo spirituality to me is remembering that there's inherent value in us being gay, in us being having this difference, and that it points to us to explore what that is.
I love this. Yeah, you mentioned other aspects of ourselves that are influenced by our gayness other than simply our sexual attraction or kind of how we express our sexuality. Could you give some examples?
Yeah, it's something I contemplate a lot. Um, Sensitivity being one of them. And, we could look at it through the lens of trauma and the nervous system, the sensitivity that we, maybe hypersensitivity that we needed to have for many of us to be aware of our circumstances and the emotions of other people to see if we were safe, to see if we were included. But through that lens, to me, that is a spiritual gift. Like that, as I was saying, like the trauma that we may experience or the challenges or limitations that we're born into influence something within us, activate or wound us in a way that moves us towards enhancing the gift of sensitivity. And so, sensitivity in being able to read people um, is one of them. Sense people, feel each other, um, to see beyond, I talk a lot about this of like we're inherently outside of the dominant paradigm. And so because of that, we get to see from an alternate perspective and we get to share from an alternate perspective. Hey, dominant like collective of humans in this particular paradigm, you might want to explore why this isn't working. There's, reasons that the way your life is structured or the way society is structured isn't working. Um, yeah, and this is a big generalization, but I think one that like if we explore it just in our smaller circles becomes pretty true. But most or many of us have an interest in making things beautiful, appreciating beauty, appreciating things that might go unnoticed by other men specifically. And, of course, having the if we foster it, having the blend of masculinity and masculine and feminine energy, being able to tune into those and flip back and forth or blend those things and how important that is as a gift as well.
Yeah, I think that last piece really sums it up for me. Um, and I feel that it's yeah, kind of taboo or like not PC to think of gay men as effeminate men. We've had a lot of shame around that,
Mm,
and that's super valid. And I think in that is also a sort of denial of the fact that
right.
one of the defining characteristics of being gay is this blending of masculine and feminine energies that is kind of obviously different
Right.
from
Right.
most straight men, and we joke about this all the time, and we have tons of humor about this, but we haven't quite come to a comfortable place of acknowledging that this is actually who we are. And I think this just speaks to the fact that we still carry so much wounding from being bullied, from societal shame, from still cultures of toxic masculinity and needing to live up to these really unrealistic ideas of what it means to be a man and a woman. But I think when if and when you can work through a lot of that, one can also see quite clear-eyed that many gay men are more of this blend, and that
Hmm.
that is like our superpower. That is what makes us unique, and that's where many of our deepest gifts emerge from. So as you said, like an appreciation of beauty and aesthetic, I think that's absolutely part of that, being able to read people, sensitivity. There was a great essay years ago in Slate that was arguing with the defining characteristic of being gay is an acute attention to detail.
Hmm.
And you could psychologically see this as, we grow up needing to hide who we are, so we become kind of hyper aware of how we're perceived in our environment and what we might be flagging to others. But so much of our culture was built around these tiny details, like the hanky code, having these kind of secret code words in order to find out who's part of the tribe.
Hmm.
And we carry this legacy of being able to spot, all of these kind of hidden details that indicate, hey, you're one of us.
Hmm.
And so whether that's innate or it's learned, that's I think a gift, that many of us have acquired, and then we bring that into the aesthetic world, or we bring that into other forms of the arts, and we have this incredible attention to detail, which is super beautiful. We bring it to our own bodies. So I'm totally with you that so many, I think so much of our gifts lie in our gayness. And spiritually, I think I'm exploring this more as, let's say, homo mysticism.
Hmm.
That many of us do have a strong connection to spirit, to God, to mystical, particularly mystical approaches to
Hmm.
spirituality. Um, I think tarot is kind of the most widespread and maybe accessible for people, but I think there's a real innate capacity in so many gay men for shamanism, for tantra, for highly energetic work. And a lot of us don't even know it because we haven't had the opportunity to explore that. But I get guys coming into my workshops and retreats all the time who are like so energetically juiced up and charged and aren't even aware of it yet.
Yes.
And just with the right conditions and the right teaching, can really open up, and then incredible spiritual gifts are revealed that they've never tended to.
Yeah, I find that with the men that I work with that there's there's but almost a shame in saying that it's something that they want to move toward because they're a little bit like, well, who am I to like claim this about myself? I'm like, no. The sooner you do that, the more that you start valuing these inherent gifts, and they're not just something that's like that makes you different. It's something that you can enhance because it is of service. It doesn't have to be of service to others, but it is, right? We're all here in exchange with each other. And so the more that any of us can lean into what our gifts are, the more we'll find value, the less we have to do the deep trauma healing. Yes, that has to be done. That has to be addressed on some level, but sometimes we can get so stuck in that like that healing phase. I'm in this like deep healing phase, but the next part of that phase is transmuting, transforming what the wound was and channeling that energy that was repression into something that's generative and creative. And I love witnessing men like at least allow themselves to admit that they have interest in what those gifts are. Um, Many times I've reflected it, they're on the verge of saying it, and I'll say, it sounds like you're saying this. And when I say that, they start crying because they're like, yes, yes, that's it. And that changes how we perceive ourselves. That's the whole point of the videos that I create is it my hope is a change in perception that is more like a remembrance of like, oh, that's right. Oh, what he's talking about is something that I inherently just feel and know. And um, something else I want to add with the gifts part of like what you expanded on with the femininity and the embrace of that. Something I've been thinking about a lot is lightness, levity, right? We have the ability, like, to laugh and create joy and celebratory experiences with each other. And that to me feels like a core gift of us is like taking taking pain and making it beauty, transmutation, as if you want to use that word, using our lightness, using our joy, using our ability to celebrate as a superpower.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so much resilience in that.
Right.
And I do feel that what I kind of see currently in gay culture, particularly in the States, there's certain ways in which it's very common for gay men to express our what I would call feminine energy. I think the arts and aesthetics is like a huge field of that. And I feel there's also this deep emotionality that gay men have that we often still have a lot of like wounding and contraction and fear of sharing. And I think this is where there's so much healing potential, especially in the realm of sex and intimacy. You know, so many men really long for intimacy, long for depth, long for connection, but we've had so many experiences of pain and disappointment and rejection that we don't allow ourselves to go for those things and to be vulnerable in asking for them. We also weren't taught how. You
Right.
know, we are men that carry this strong feminine energy, but we were raised as boys. I went to all boys school, you know, from grades 6 through 12. So I'm being educated as if I'm not actually who I am. And most of us didn't have parents or mentors who could really see the specialness of our gifts and help develop and cultivate them. So I also learned to be incredibly competitive, you know, to hide my feelings, to shut down huge aspects of who I am. And I feel that there's this particular piece of how do we express our feminine in the bedroom,
Hmm.
actually, that holds the potential for so much healing between men.
Hmm.
That actually so many of us want this and long for this and dream of this, but are afraid. And when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to be met and seen in that vulnerability, it's so healing and it can really connect us back to our hearts. And I think that's yeah, that's kind of my hope for our community.
I have a question for you around sexual healing. Um, you know, as I said at the very beginning, there were wounds, sexual wounds specifically, that I wasn't aware that I had until much later in life. And so that was overlaid unconsciously onto every sexual experience that I had. And so a big part of my own journey has been unwinding that, becoming safe in my body, um, and understanding with a lot of compassion why there were certain actions or why I felt the way I did in certain experiences. Um, and I don't know if this is true, but in my orbit, there are quite a few men who have had, wouldn't necessarily go as far to say like abuse, but sexual experiences that were damaging in some way, but they don't see that until they explore a little bit further. I've had people in session with me share a story about a sexual experience that they did not register as traumatizing, but everything that they told me about it and their disassociation from it told me that's certainly there's healing that needs to happen there. And so I wonder, like people who are coming to you are probably already somewhat conscious that their relationship with sexuality, sexual energy, um, is something that they want to explore and or heal in some way. What about people who aren't aware? You know, this is where I feel the gay community may be like bouncing pain off of each other because there's a lot of that unconscious, yeah, pain that's brought into sexual experiences with each other. Is that a
Absolutely.
question? Is that a question or a
I can just respond. Yeah.
Yeah.
A, yes, we all bring our histories with us. And this is one of the challenges of dating and hooking up and exploring sex in the gay community. You know, we all have our own histories of pain, of hiding who we are, as I said, of rejection. And these dynamics get played out in our spaces. Some men are aware that they have these histories and that it would benefit them to do healing work around it. Others aren't, but might just feel a sense of this isn't working. Maybe I don't feel attracted to kind of hookup culture the way that I see other people doing it, or I've done it and it doesn't feel good for me, or dating is like really fucking hard. And so sometimes people come to Tantra out of just a sense of it's not working.
Hmm.
I don't know why. Maybe I'm not aware of what my part in that equation is, but I'm aware that something's not working for me and I need it to change. And I think that there's kind of a growing sentiment, not just among gay men, but among humanity, that shit's not working.
Hmm.
And especially in gay culture, I think people are absolutely exhausted by grinder culture. And there's a deep sense that like we can do better than this. Like this isn't actually serving us very well. We haven't necessarily en masse figured out great solutions, but those who feel the pain acutely enough and feel resourced enough to seek solutions are. Um, and then I think people often get on a journey of finding, well, what am I responsible for? So I also was having tons of sex in my 20s where I was consistently having my boundaries crossed because I had no idea what they were and I couldn't feel them in my body. And I would leave those encounters feeling really bitter and blaming the other guy.
Hmm.
He's a dick, he should have been able to read me, or just feeling angry and not really having any story around it, but just blaming. And then through my own healing journey, realizing that, oh, actually, it's my responsibility to put boundaries in place and to have discernment around the types of connections that I'm moving into, and to maybe look at maybe a part of me was actually drawn to these connections where these guys were going to take advantage of me. That was a tough one. So I think that people do learn that. Um, and you'll meet people who are, really different points in their own healing journeys. And I think that's what's beautiful about doing group work. And I know you also do groups, is that there's the opportunity to be in community with other men who are on that path as well, because it can feel really lonely and isolating. But there is absolutely an abundance of incredibly beautiful men who are doing that work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the most beautiful thing to see just how conversation, right? Not even like a workshop, but just gathering in a circle on a topic like this, where people may feel isolated or alone, and people just sharing from their hearts. It's absolutely transformative to witness that.
Yeah, and we're all over too. I think it's easy to imagine that it's like in certain places, but especially for retreats that I've been on, men really come from all over. Men living in rural areas, in small villages, also in big cities. And that's always beautiful for me to see these communities grow and expand.
Yeah, generally I just feel a consciousness rising in us as a collective, as us as homos. I see that happening, a yearning for that and a recognition of like dominant gay culture doesn't work. Like maybe it's great when you first come out, but really it's not sustainable for anyone to live in that kind of intense bubble. And who am I outside of that question that gets you to move and to question yourself, I think is happening for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, and for me, there's also a piece on you don't have to throw it away.
Hmm.
Like to me, there's so much gold in kind of mainstream gay culture that I absolutely want to love and celebrate and continue supporting and give them my money. and, um, and it's very easy to fall into this sense of this isn't working for me, and so I'm going to reject it. And maybe you need to for a period. But I think that it's for me there's still a lot there. There's still a lot there that I really care about and that I think are really unique expressions of who we are. So maybe it doesn't resonate with everyone and it can very much be limiting. But I guess I want to leave people with a message that, becoming spiritual doesn't necessarily mean like turning your back on all of the things that have brought you joy.
Yeah.
Follow those things.
Yeah.
And maybe there's other things that will also bring a deep fulfillment in the places where it's felt hollow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Mm. Thank you for this. I'm out of time. This has been so fun, though.
So good. Yeah, thank you for inviting this conversation. And yeah, however this gets, we haven't even talked about like, oh, it's like posting this on YouTube or
Distribution.
where is this going? But
Yeah.
whoever hears this, yeah, my hope is that it's just a conversation, these are kinds of conversations that I always was seeking for on social media years ago. So I'm glad that I can be a part of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your openness, too. I mean, I know talking about sex and love and identity, these are like super personal uh, issues and we're as you said we're changing all the time. It's always one of my fears is that I'll say something and then a year later I'm going to be like, oh, I don't believe that at all anymore. so
Quite
so I so
possible. It's
appreciate your
quite possible.
willingness. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hold anyone to any standard of like who they were even a year ago. Like, all right, who are you today? Who am I today?
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, thanks for inviting this conversation. It's been really nice.
My pleasure. Hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah.